I'll never forget that Tuesday morning, not because it was peaceful or bright, but because of what Patricia Harmon did and how everything in our community spun out from there. Picture this, a grown woman in a designer tracksuit standing in the middle of our parking lot with a paint roller in her hand and this smug little grin under her giant sunglasses, rolling thick gray paint right over the lines that kept our parking lot sane. Years of order wiped away in minutes just because Patricia, the self-crowned queen of the HOA, decided it was her job to fix our supposed problems. You ever have one of those moments where your brain just freezes? That was me standing by the lobby with a coffee, too stunned to even reach for my phone. I should have filmed her. Later, when the police were putting her in handcuffs, I actually wished I had, if only to replay that shrieking meltdown where she kept yelling about her authority being undermined. But let me back up a sec, because the chaos Patricia unleashed didn't start that morning with her roller and her arrogance. It had been building like storm clouds you ignore until your whole picnic gets drenched. See, Patricia had only been in Maplewood Gardens 2 years, but within 6 months, she wormed her way onto the board, and then right on her 1-year anniversary, boom, she's president. Our last president, Robert, just vanished, retired to Florida for his health, but we all suspected it was just to get away from Patricia and her relentless suggestions. The thing with Patricia is she never knew how to let anything go. For weeks, she'd show up to HOA meetings railing about our wasted space, insisting she could squeeze 3 more cars into the lot if we just ignored, the fire lane common sense and probably physics. The lines, by the way, were city-approved, measured, and marked by professionals. But none of that mattered to Patricia. So the morning after her little art project, I walk outside to what can only be described as vehicular anarchy. Sandra, my neighbor, is boxed in by 2 SUVs who both just guessed where to park. No lines, no order, just a free-for-all that had people double parked, triple parked, and by noon, 3 fender benders and enough cursing to peel paint. And there's Patricia out by her front yard, watering her petunias, acting like she just saved the world. Just streamlining things, she said, all cheerful, like she hadn't just violated every bylaw in the book, and probably a few state laws, too. I told her as much, and she just waved me off like I was a fly. Patricia kept insisting she had executive authority as president. The next HOA meeting, a total circus. She sits at the head of the table, banging her gavel, refusing to let anyone bring up the parking disaster. Instead, she actually tried to fine people for improper parking in the now unmarked lot. You can't make this stuff up. The irony was completely lost on her. That's when I knew we needed backup. The property management company Premier owned the lot, so I spent my lunch break showing their rep Jennifer the photos. Her face went pale. She starts muttering about liability and legal exposure, making calls before I'd even finished my sentence. She promised they'd deal with it, but I wasn't waiting around. Instead, I headed to Tom's unit. He's a retired cop, keeps a dash cam running 24/7. And sure enough, Tom's camera caught Patricia at 7:43 that morning, sneaking out with her paint looking over her shoulder before starting her project. For 2 hours, she methodically erased every line, even stopping for a selfie. Who does that word spread quick first on the neighborhood Facebook group? You should have seen the memes. Then someone started a petition to remove her. In 48 hours, 150 people signed. But the game really changed when Tom's footage made it to the local news. 3 days later, I'm making dinner when sirens start wailing outside. I look out to see 2 police cruisers and a handful of neighbors already gathering. The officers march up to Patricia's door. She's still yelling that this is HOA business and the police have no jurisdiction. But they had 23 statements, documentation from Premier and Tom's crystal clear video. She tried every excuse. It's for property values. It's a misunderstanding. But when they explained that vandalizing shared property over $20,000 was a felony, you could see the color drain out of her face. Then they found the paint-stained gloves in her garage. Game over. The whole block was out there when they put her in cuffs. She kept shouting about lawsuits about her rights as president, but the officers were stone cold reading her rights and walking her out to the cruiser. Somebody started a slow clap. By the time she was in the back seat, half the street was cheering. Normally, I'd feel bad for public humiliation, but honestly, after months of her nonsense, it felt like karma with interest. After that, everything changed. Maplewood Gardens came alive in a way it hadn't in years. The HOA board minus Patricia held an emergency meeting and voted to restore the lines properly. No drama, no delays. A professional crew showed up the next morning, neighbors brought out coffee and donuts, and everyone pitched in to help direct cars. Folks who'd barely nodded at each other in months stood around swapping stories and actually laughed together. For a moment, it felt like the neighborhood had gotten a reset. Meanwhile, Patricia's legal saga was just getting started. The DA charged her with felony vandalism misuse of HOA funds because she'd bought the paint with the community credit card and filing false statements. Premier filed a civil suit. Her bail was set at $25,000, and she was barred from contacting any HOA board members. When the formal vote to remove her happened, more than 80% of homeowners showed up, most people I'd ever seen at one of those things. The new board president promised real transparency, monthly open forums, and no more silencing residents. For the first time in ages, people actually felt heard. 3 weeks after her arrest, I pulled into my freshly painted spot, crisp white lines gleaming in the sun with new lighting and even clearly marked handicapped spaces, everything Patricia had blocked for years. The last board meeting before her trial was packed. Turns out Patricia had made over $15,000 in unauthorized purchases, all benefiting her own unit. The board voted to demand restitution. Patricia, stuck in her townhouse, had to watch all the celebrations from her window. Poetic right. 6 months later came the trial. Patricia showed up in an expensive suit, acting like she was due for a slap on the wrist. Her lawyer painted her as some overzealous volunteer, but the prosecutor wasn't having it. He laid out the pattern of abuse. The damage even brought in old Mrs. Dean, who'd fallen in the parking lot during the chaos. Judge Coleman, tough as nails, didn't buy any of Patricia's "I was just helping" act. She hammered home the idea that people in power need to be responsible, that Patricia had never shown any remorse, not once. The sentence: 2 years probation with check-ins, 300 hours of community service, mostly graffiti cleanup, fittingly ethics classes, and $40,000 in fines and restitution payable in 18 months. Oh, and she's banned from any HOA board for a decade. When Judge Coleman read that out, Patricia just sat there, mouth opening and closing like a fish, knuckles white on the table, reality finally sinking in. Outside the courthouse, the rest of us finally felt like we could breathe again. No more drama, no more threats, just neighbors trying to get along, grateful for the peace and the fresh white lines. But you know what? Even with the chaos over, folks are still split. Was Patricia a criminal or just a misguided perfectionist who snapped under the weight of her own ego? Some say the sentence was too harsh. Others say it wasn't enough. So tell me, what do you think? Where's the line between doing what's right for a community and taking it too far? Let's hear it in the comments. Who was right, who was wrong, and how would you handle it if your HOA went rogue?